Welcome to the PI Podcast, Political Insights for the Palaging Inis. I'm your host, Matt, and with me is my co-host, political scientist, meme lord, who recently narrowly escaped the Canadian mad cow disease, also known as Muscabado syndrome, Borge.
Yeah, it was way off. Okay. PI nyo, PI nating lahat. Board share at your service.
Yes, and welcome back. And this is our first episode for 2023. So belated Happy New Year and Chinese Happy New Year. Kong Hei Fat Sai. And thank you for joining us once again. It's a bit of a long hiatus, but we're finally back, George. How? Maybe a quick update. What have you been doing? And how are things?
Papers. So
Papers. Writing.
Right.
Yeah.
So basically, what we're going to discuss today. Writing.
Yes. Come to think of it, it's my resolution to try writing, but maybe this episode will help. But it's been a while, and we're a bit rusty at sa totoo lang, sa tagal na hindi ko ginamit yung mic. Medyo ang baho na ng mic ko. Kaya shit.
Dude, you should wipe it with an alcohol.
Anyway.
Lang yan, tangina.
Mamaya, nililisin ko. But yeah, amoy kalawang. Sa alikabok. Anyway. But, of course, there's a lot of political issues, but right now we're going to talk something that's a bit more closely, maybe more relatable to students and in general, the thing about artificial intelligence, how slowly we might be taken over by robots and the internet and Skynet and the Matrix. But much closer to our experience as teachers. Quite recently, there's this generative AI, or artificial intelligence program or software on the internet, where they, a lot of AI can create things out of like prompts. Like for example, there are some programs where you can type in like, it reminds you of like things like Ask Jeeves back in the early 2000s, where you could ask, what is this and what is that? And it's like you can have a conversation, but they can do some things as complicated as demonstrate or create a script or a screenplay between Batman and the Joker set in, say, Bangkok or something like that. Or recently, our colleagues, it made it to the news that some students submit ChatGPT generated homeworks and assignments. So yeah, it's a big thing, and they've actually been trying to test it on how sophisticated it can do, and it actually passed some law exam entrance, law school entrance exams, and what's that? Even a management course of its B-. It didn't ace it, but yeah. But how about you, Borge? What do you think about this? The rise of ChatGPT and generative AI.
Well, I would usually take an ordinary Marxist approach to technology, which is, it's there, it's probably good, it's probably bad, depends on what we do with it. But one thing is for sure, it may and it will cause certain things to go obsolete if it's pursued. Things, especially in education, practices in education would be obsolete in due time. So is it a question of cracking down on it, or is it a question on adapting to it? Is it a question of harnessing it? And I think the core concern would be on writing, because ChatGPT targets the practice of writing. That's why we're focusing on it right now. But am I ambivalent over it? At this point, ambivalent but not fake. So I have mixed emotions towards it, but it all boils down to, we need to work with it because it's there. If the internet does not collapse, it would remain there.
Oh gosh, yeah.
So yes.
Well, come to think of it, I to an extent I agree with you, because I mean it's horrifying and lazy to just submit an essay generated, like write an essay about the rights of citizens, or I mean, because it's. But then again, technology has improved and developed to a point where it's used in a lot of things, and it, like for example, I'm pretty sure a lot of our students use the term like Grammarly, which corrects our grammar. Of course, in English language courses, it might be unfair, but at least here it shows, well, it's automated, but
Mm,
at least people can see better ways of writing it. Like for
mm,
instance, on the one hand, I do agree that it can be properly used. Like it can
mm,
show a demonstration or maybe a sample work on what
mm,
they presumably a well crafted essay would look and structured essay would look like, but it
mm,
does have its own limitations. And I mean, we're not quite experts, but we do know that it sources its answers from, well, basically internet searches and
mm,
what is inputted into it. In other words, basically it's the bell curve of essays. It recreates and arranges the average level of how you say comprehension. Literally, like it didn't ace the courses it took, but it got B minus. That's the exact word. So again, to an extent, so it has its limitations, but like many artificial intelligence, it gets smarter, and to a point, almost it if it can replace us human beings, that's it's a little something. Like it has also been asked to grade itself and it evaluate itself, so that it has a certain level of reflexivity. So
mm.
if it becomes self-aware, holy shit. So yeah, in fact, there was this article by Gideon Lasko. He actually posted it in his recent article on a response, like him asking questions and it answering. And so, of course, it asks itself, like, we do have a biases, but it's a bias based on the data that it is given, and it is a tool. It defended itself. It is a tool that can be used, but it still believes, quote unquote, that students should, again, use their own critical thinking skills. Like, oh wow, it can be ethical. So
Mm,
yeah, it is something. Like, for example, that there. I mean, it's not the only one, but
mm,
there are other AIs that, in a way, I use are that are that it's used for many things,
mm,
but sometimes it like some people, like for example, they teach it to say like
mm,
racist things, and in a
mm,
way sometimes ChatGPT in particular stops and even responds saying this is racist and should not be should
mm,
not this is the wrong thing to say. In fact, some teenagers that played with it said that write a pro-Hitler speech. And it did so, but at the same time, they said, but Hitler is not a good human being. Therefore, it would be wrong to believe in this. So it's
mm.
like, I don't know. It has some,
It reflects
it has
specific human
character. Yeah.
values. It reflects specific
But
human values. That's one thing.
to extent, sometimes the values of of the if it's programmers, but also the values of the people that input it, input
Mm.
information into it. So yeah, I don't know. Any other thoughts
No,
on that?
we
Like,
should not look at, well,
yeah.
again. Look, we should not look at technology first from a black and white perspective, nor should we look at it as something
Mm,
that can be totally alienated
mm,
from us humans. Well, at
mm,
least for the time being.
mhm,
But for the time being,
mhm.
the article by our colleague Juni Stanislao in
Yes.
Rappler. So we would link it that. So he presents a more balanced take on AI and the academe. So
Hmm.
do check out that article. It's a good one.
Yeah.
But the main point is, it is there. As I've said, it is there. We need to deal with it. We can crack down on certain practices, but we can maximize its benefits, as you have said.
Hmm.
And we tried it on earlier. So
Yeah. I mean, oddly enough, it was on one of your like pet topics, dialecticism,
hmm.
and it tried to it gave a few answers. But what do you think about the answers that it gave?
Again, if you are the average person with an average knowledge on dialectics,
Ooh,
then yeah,
okay.
you would be caught by it. You would easily agree with it,
Hmm.
since it states the thesis, antithesis,
Hmm.
synthesis, which again is a thorough misreading of dialectics. And yeah, it got
Right.
the multidimensionality, multi-perspective right, but it doesn't flesh out how to synthesize. So
Hmm.
it just settles with that one.
Hmm.
So you need a proper
Hmm.
reading of dialectics to know how to synthesize opposing viewpoints. But ChatGPT just settles
Hmm.
with that. Well, at least for that task.
Hmm.
And we
Right.
also asked it to analyze Hannah Arendt and John Dewey. So
Yeah.
and
And how do you find that?
I got the John Dewey part wrong. So
Ooh.
again, without
Hmm.
close reading, I think one of my readings, Professor Pipanoris, theories on democracy, democratic politics. She actually posted on Twitter. ChatGPT doesn't really have an extensive reading like her students. So,
Uh-huh.
so
Although come to
it's
think of it,
basically
if you're,
average.
yeah. I mean, if you're going to check like what 60 plus students papers, you wouldn't. Well, I don't know, but I myself would probably struggle to distinguish this from a student, like an average student. Yeah, maybe they don't know better, but I don't know. What do you think? How would you distinguish an AI from an actual, well, from a student's paper?
I think as far as practice goes, I have applied my own ways of dealing with fluent bullshit coming from students. So I'm not easily impressed with any fluent writings because I ask for very, very thoroughly specific questions that you can only find if you actually read the damn thing. So yun ang aking that's my what you call safety measure for that one. So I don't ask the average question. Hence, they could not give me an average answer if they actually tried.
Or like, can you give an example maybe of an instruction or a question? How would you phrase it? It's probably a good tip for teachers that may be listening right now. How to deal with ChatGPT? Maybe what questions can you ask that can make it difficult to use a ChatGPT?
Well, for example, on one of my book analysis questions for Jean-Jacques Rousseau. So most writings would focus on Rousseau, the state, and voting. But then again, one of my questions would be, what is Rousseau's idea of the people in relation to a legislator? So that's a very specific part of the book, one of the crucial parts of books, usually overlooked by average analysis or reviews. So you can only find out the answer for that when you actually read it. And I also ask my students to critique. So if ChatGPT can criticize a paper, fine. Or if it can criticize a book, fine. But I'm asking students to criticize along very specific lines. So they would not, it's not an assurance that they would arrive at the same answer, but I would observe how they would arrive at it.
Right.
So, and I think I encountered, it's a possibility. I'm not saying that it is, I haven't confirmed it, but it's a possibility that one paper that I checked last year was either generated by an AI or it was, he had someone write it for him. So
a ghostwriter. It's another economy. Yeah,
it's another economy. So either way, the paper was well written, was fluent, but it didn't even answer my questions properly. It just passed by it. So so it was fun. It was full of slogans. It was full of the average statements on how to do things,
right.
common opinions on things. So if you're a professor who is easily impressed by good writing or easily impressed by slogans or easily impressed by slogans or your own opinions, then you can easily be fooled.
Right. In fact, it can be, well, if maybe it can be used to generate some, not an entire essays, but some paragraphs. So it could just be like snuck in, so it could, come to think of it, personally, if someone were to do that, I'm a little tempted to say that, then that person is creative enough to, to merit that grade, if they're able to do that. But I mean, just mix and match, mix it with their own, but just to help pad it, I mean, I find that to be smart. If ever they can use it to create not so obvious parts of a larger essay, like a review-related literature, which really, if it's just summaries, then actually, that's one thing. It's like it used to be like SparkNotes was used as a similar, had a similar issue. Like, would people still read books with SparkNotes because it provided all the summaries of books so people just used SparkNotes and Cliff Notes, those two things. Those are really much older websites, but people still read books apparently. So that's still a good sign.
And students still cite SparkNotes.
Yeah. Oh, that too. It's it's a mixed bag of results, but I suppose like any new technology, it'll be integrated, but it has never quite caught on. The academe also adapts, and hopefully I think the best thing to do is just to be on guard,
Yeah, be on
and to be
guard and
aware.
adapt. Yeah.
Although personally, one thing I would try, I, one mechanism I have tried is to integrate this in with your own personal experience or
Mm.
observation. So it'll be difficult to to try and like and get that from ChatGPT unless you've input it already. So I don't know.
But then again, how
Um,
can you
as a
how
person
can you
living in the
confirm
Philippines, yeah.
how can you confirm the personal experience? Who knows? ChatGPT can provide that one.
Who knows?
So
Then
yeah.
again, well, I do want to ask you a question though before we
Mm.
go into the topic of writing itself. Is it possible to ethically use ChatGPT? And if ever, like, what are these guidelines for you? Yeah.
It is there, as I've said, it's a technology. We have tried it, and I'm now curious about trying it further. But one thing, I draw the line with this. You can
Mm.
use it for whatever you want, but if you try to pass it off as your own, then that is the
Mhm.
line.
Right.
If you try to pass it off as your own, then that is the problem.
Mhm.
So if you can use it to make your notes, if you can use it to guide your writing, if you want to outline the paper using ChatGPT or whatnot, if you want
Mhm.
somewhere to start, if you want to start with the average
Mhm.
before you write your paper, then go ahead.
Right.
But if you start passing it off as your own, submit it as your own paper, then that
Mhm.
is the line, really.
Right.
Ikaw, do you have any? How can we ethically use it?
Personally, I am tempted to use it for my own papers, publications. Honestly, just bad things, But hopefully, the reviewers don't listen to this. But like I said, sometimes maybe it's possible. Number one, to see a demonstration of, like, for example, for as a student, you're not always familiar with like well-written essays. We don't read things that are longer than a TikTok or like a tweet or a Facebook post. Then perhaps maybe you can just ask like if you want to know what it looks like, and then it can be used as a model or demonstration. So
Hmm,
if you can study it and write around it, or maybe modify it
hmm,
slightly, like what you said, it's
hmm,
fine. You can also use it to, again, like what you said, synthesize huge, complicated, complicated
Debates.
articles,
Alright, cool.
materials, whole books. So and also it can compare and
Hmm,
synthesize. But of course, it's up to, well, yeah, up to you to
hmm,
add to it and integrate it to the
hmm.
essay, because it'll never just be that. Like it
Yeah.
can be used like a review for literature, like I said. So
Now,
yeah,
regarding the review for literature, it just passed by my head since you're planning to use it.
yeah.
I
Well,
think
we'll
the I
see.
think the I think the best way to use it is, again, if you allow it to condense multiple articles, multiple ideas or debates into a few paragraphs, you can start with that so you would know your target, because
Mm-hmm.
it is the average.
Mm-hmm.
It is the average, and one of the challenges for us researchers is to grasp the average, because that's
Right.
where we start whenever we try to criticize or to provide a new framework.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a good starting point, to
Mm-hmm.
admit, but again, to end it there and pass it as your own, yeah, that's
Mm-hmm.
it.
And it's weird though. Can you what if they cite ChatGPT like the same way people cited Wikipedia? Holy crap, that
I think
is.
that's the laziest way that the academe could adapt to it, which is to give
Mhm.
it proper citation instructions. No, 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 no. That's the
Yeah,
laziest way to adapt to it. But then again,
and
that's a
people,
possibility. Who knows?
who knows? But for now, it could be used like as a outline or as a backbone. But
Hmm,
it's up to, well, it's the job for the teachers to give more meaty and comprehensive questions.
hmm,
Instead of just ask. It's really good at answering what's, and
hmm.
comparing,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
what's, when's, where's,
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
who's. But the whys and hows, it's a bit tricky. Well, maybe it can do a bit the hows, but the whys, and of course,
The what
again, personal
else?
experience and what else. Yeah, it could still do better. So as of now, in its current form, that's what we can offer. That's the
Hmm.
compromise we can offer. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a compromise. But another thing,
Mm.
probably this is, as you have said, is a mixed bag.
Mhm.
Uh, but let's start with the assumption that there is an overflow, or there's massive amounts of data and existing works right now.
Mhm.
So as far as I'm concerned, human society right now, or at least the academe, is
Mhm.
it's a challenge for us to synthesize this massive body of knowledge. What if ChatGPT can allow academics to start condensing into focus, to more focused areas. So instead of us spending time writing RLs, it would never end because there are too many works written on one single subject.
Right.
And it can be condensed. Then after it is condensed, then we can move on to actually novel ideas or novel questions.
Perhaps.
Anyway, perhaps.
But then again, that would just, well, people might say you might not need the RL anymore since it's already there. I don't know. Anyway,
who knows? I mean, maybe we may no longer need the rest of the RL, but we would still need the critique of the RL. So
yes.
Students can probably focus on that in the future.
Maybe
we'll see.
Well, yeah. I mean, some people say that. I mean, the math and engineering and accounting courses have already integrated the calculator. People used to say, "Is math ruined because of the calculators?" Like, no, it's just a tool that saves time. So I don't know if this is the same way with maybe the social science and the humanities. I don't know.
It can be. Kasi I mean, if you look at a single topic, there's thousands of works written on it. And many of those works, even if they don't cite each other, actually say the same thing. So instead of running through all of those, if ChatGPT can be empowered in such a way that it can synthesize articles, then so it would give more mental space for scholars to actually ask new questions, more fundamental questions, instead of simply asking questions already answered in the other side of the world by a paper that they failed to take into account.
Well, I don't know. I'm actually curious if we can input more complex and philosophical questions like into ChatGPT and see if it can reflect on it. So that could be an idea for bonus content if you had more time to be like a PI raw or something. Oh wow, what's that? Or like So, but we'll see. But as of now, it is fascinating. But in a way, we'll wait and see what happens next. But as of now, we're open-minded, right? So we're open-minded, cautiously open-minded. There you go. But as of now, I think it just brings us to another topic. So if ChatGPT is a tool for writing, how should we treat writing? Or maybe we can discuss the nature of writing. So at the same time, ChatGPT, especially in writing essays, some people say it's a shortcut to to thinking your original thoughts. So perhaps let's start with discussing the relationship between writing and thinking. So you could say that even Jordan Peterson, said that clear writing is clear thinking, and vice versa. So do you have anything to say about that? As a writing as a thinking process.
I think writing is again an extension of our mental processes. That's why even in psychiatry, writing journals is part of therapy. It allows us to clarify and to make conscious what is subconscious, to clarify what is more or less confused, to put it in words. The same thing with technology is an extension of our appendages. That's the very essence of technology as far as I'm concerned. It's an extension of our appendages. It's a question not of whether we should have it. It's just a matter of whether those appendages would control our mental processes instead of the other way around.
Right.
So again, but going back to writing, I do agree with Jordan Peterson on that one. Clear writing is a manifestation of clear thinking. And I would add on that systematic note writing is actually an extension of good memory. So, but how we think and how we write and how we revise, that's another thing about writing. Writing is also about revisions. The willingness to revise your output is indicative of a willingness to develop an idea instead of just settling with it. So if you have written something and if you're happy with it without revisions, then you are probably a very opinionated creature. So and that doesn't really work for the social sciences. Well, for creative writing, then go ahead, fine. But let me ask, how does your thought process work when you're writing? In the most systematic representation you can make, how does it go?
Well, I suppose the reason why I have a hard time like writing. Well, no, I mean, I honestly, there's this quote that summarizes my relation with writing is that I actually hate writing, but I love having written. Forgot who said that, but we'll put that in the show notes. We'll see. But it's good to have finished writing, yeah. But after that, like, but at the same time, it's always it's a struggle. It's literally like giving birth. So sometimes I would trick myself into writing long essays by actually writing short sporadic essays, kind of a lot like Friedrich Nietzsche. That's why I like it. Like if you notice, if you read Nietzsche, like the Gay Science or even Genealogy of Morals, they're like small bursts of like short paragraphs, pause and that. And in a way, that's how I write now, because rather than have long systematic thoughts, I think it's the opposite, where we unite in the opposite styles. Like I actually just write like writing prompts or like a topics thesis statements. um let's see if I have some thesis statements. I don't know, one thing I wrote the other time, is like it's just a brain fart like while drinking coffee. um you're in a way you feel the most awake after the first sip of coffee. But in succeeding sips, can you actually feel more awake than awake? I don't know. It's just a brain fart, literally. But I thought I would use it sometime in a poem or in an essay, or like what's the word? I don't know.
This
It's some
is
things like that. So yeah, and then so I jot down these thoughts and then expound on them later on. So it's someone who is a bit less systematic and more spontaneous. So yeah. So sometimes most of the essays are like reducible to one sentences anyway. So having those topic sentence could be the seeds of a larger piece. But anyway, yeah, you were gonna say something?
Yeah, again, I think between us, again, there's the reality that there's not one single writing style. So again, we're not here to impose any writing style on people, and as our listeners have already deduced, there are at least two writing styles here. Hey, I'm also spontaneous, you dipshit. No,
Oh, okay.
we do
Yeah.
have very different writing styles. There are two
I didn't
writing
say you
styles.
weren't,
But I think
yeah.
you are closer to, again, this is an old art. I don't know if there are any recent authors who are courageous enough to use this style, which is aphoristic writing. Aphoristic writing, which is writing bent on condensing a certain essential reality or observation. So you have, and it's not a meh style. You have the likes of, as you have said, Friedrich Nietzsche, but his aphoristic writing is due to his syphilis. So I don't know if you have any medical impediment that would.
I mean, that's why God is dead and we have killed him. That's a great line. But I bet like after that, around it, it's like just yeah. It's not exactly
He had to write between meds. And so
in between seizures.
so that one. So another one would be Goethe. Goethe also had a series of aphorisms, maxims. But I think the best, and I think I would recommend this one later, the best aphoristic writer. I don't know if you can find. I think I already recommended him to you. I don't know if you can find a copy of his work. La Rochefoucauld. So La Rochefoucauld and his maxims, they are to an extent the peak of that style. So, but then again, the challenge for maxims and aphoristic writing is the capacity to condense an essence without sounding dogmatic and while being evocative at the same time. So there's a difference between just shitting out an opinion and actually making your readers think. And I think that's the great art of aphoristic writing. So, and I raised this one because, again, writing, we are discussing writing here in general, and that doesn't only involve writing papers, not only about writing notes, but also in the age of social media, writing posts.
Yes.
So,
I mean, most thoughts are actually, or thesis statements can be good as tweets. I don't know if I posted this, but like one in my notebook right here in my hand, it says there, an example would be a metaphor is borrowed beauty when an adjective is not enough. So that's
See,
yeah. So it's condensed. It has a bit of alliteration, but it's a thesis statement. It can be described and taken up into a larger essay. So things like that. So it can start small, and if you can't write full essays, it can start with these small aphorisms,
hmm.
and yeah, maybe explain those things. So
Do you
yeah,
need to start with aphorisms, or you can just end with that? Just
yeah.
write a book on aphorisms and maxims. Jesus, you'll join the likes of Rush Foucault for that one.
Mm,
So that's ready
yeah.
publication for you. Uh, so
Mm,
again, you can make it a start into a longer paper, but not necessarily. Aphorisms
mhm,
are a style on their own. It's a
right.
genre on their own.
Hmm. But at the same time, and the reason why I start with aphorisms is it's an easy way to catch thoughts. I can't remember the exact person, but I think that one thing that getting that uh, one quote that someone said was always keep a notepad with you. I think it's one recommendation we can have,
Mm,
so to let to don't so that your thoughts won't escape you.
yeah.
You never know when you need it. So it's
Mm,
literally like a net, like a butterfly. Like if thoughts are butterflies, it's like a
yeah.
net, so you can catch it and
Yep.
you can remember it for later. But at the same time, you know, at least when we start with that, thinking can be uh like, how do you say this? Like, I don't know, like, or sometimes if these are already like thoughts or like statements, but sometimes if it's about questions,
Mm,
then it'll move to, well, if you can't have a full essay on it, it starts with specific phrases and thoughts that you can
mm,
outline into it. So I suppose, with that being said, I think writing and thinking process, especially if you use a pen and paper, or even like in Word documents, they can be used like how do you say, what uh when writing drafts, you could be
mm,
as liberal as you can,
oh,
so in other words, you could allow yourself to be as stupid as possible, so that you can find like a nugget of gold there,
mm,
like so yeah, so you can draft liberally but edit mercilessly. So before you submit the thing, you take out the stupid parts. But at least
yeah.
that's the freedom of the blank paper or the blank canvas or the blank
Mm.
document. Yeah.
Yeah, you let your pen bleed. That's how I do it.
Ooh,
That's
ouch.
my thing.
Okay.
You let your pen bleed. And again, writing is a
Kadiri
reflection of.
naman. Pen
But
is
then again,
bleeding. Okay, okay,
yeah.
okay.
Well, it pooped.
Yeah.
But
It stings anyway. Yeah.
writing again reflects your thought processes. If you can master your thought processes, if you have
Mm.
an awareness of your thought processes, then that would certainly help with your writing.
Mhm.
This is hard, easier said than done, really.
Mm. All right.
Mm.
But this is a very general,
Yeah.
a very general thing. Like it could start from like even your personal experience. Like there's an experience that you don't really, in a way, you don't really can't really understand.
Mm,
So yeah, you could just write honestly and
mm,
write. How do you say? It's the most human when we're at our most human. Anyway, ChatGPT can't really do this. It didn't experience the life through your eyes and with your own heart. To clarify your own emotions. I mean, like what you said when during journaling as therapy. Sometimes, again, when you have all these emotions and you put them into words, that can actually, in a way, unburden your heart. That's a weird thing. I'm not sure if we mentioned this in the podcast before, but was it also Friedrich Nietzsche? Again, we're mentioning him a lot today. It's like
mm,
there's always contempt from the act of speaking, because finding the words for something is saying something that is dead in our hearts. In some cases, it's also sad, but at the same time, yeah, it unburdens
mm.
our hearts. So that's, in one way, it's also emotional therapy, but also rationalizing, I guess, what happened to us from our
Understanding with a
emotions,
more
to
appropriate
understand it.
term.
Yeah, yeah.
Why the hell did you use the word rationalizing? Anyway, this
Well,
understanding is a more appropriate term.
why is what's wrong with the word of rationalizing?
And
You know
rationalizing is already tied with justifying something.
that
So
is not
uh,
justifiable, right?
Understanding is a bit broader.
I mean,
It's also more appropriate.
rationalizing is a value neutral term.
Is it? As far as common usage is concerned, it's not.
Common usage, there's connotation and denotation. Denotation is the meaning of the word as such. Connotation is the meaning of the word as being used in society. So I don't know. I mean, maybe it's the wrong word, but it's what it costs. But I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that word. Anyway, so yeah. But from the general act of writing, it can be utterly casual. It can be something personal as a journal. It can also be used in creating works of literature. Well, when it's close to like maybe someone in a specific scientific field, say for example, writing as analysts. So of course, analysis is a form of thinking. But how would you distinguish thinking in general, with writing as an analyst? Say for example, maybe writing op-ed pieces, I suppose, or maybe even journal articles. Like, what do you think? How would you distinguish that?
No, I think we can ask an additional question. I think we can link it up now with politics, which is also part of our discussion.
Right.
I dare not speak about scientific writing in general. So I think we can focus on writing on politics.
In a field or a discipline?
Yeah, I would rather focus on politics for me. You can come to writing in general as analysis, but as far as writing on politics is concerned, writing analysis on politics is concerned, there is a twofold challenge as far as my own experience is concerned. Well, first, it's knowing where to put your emotions. So again, politics is an easily triggering issue. That's why I could not speak for the sciences in general, because they're not discussing the same triggering shit that we do in politics. So there's a higher probability of being more emotional in writing political analysis. Now, it is unavoidable. It is unavoidable to include emotions there when writing in politics. It's just a matter of where to put it. So there are multiple genres in writing. So if you want a fiery paper, then go write a polemic, but don't pass it off as research. But if you can cool your head, look at the political issue without any, without much emotion, then go write an actual systematic analysis of it.
Right.
So that's the first challenge on emotions. But second, I think it's the issue of questions. Are we writing to answer questions, or are we writing to ask more questions? So that's another issue that we must face in writing, especially on politics. Kasi as far as political writing is concerned, there is a temptation to jump immediately from analysis to recommendations. So there's
well, we do that a lot,
Yeah, we do that a lot to understand. But there's that temptation. But only for policy briefs. That's a different genre altogether. In actual journal articles or in books, you're not supposed to end with grand conclusions. You're supposed to end with more questions. So that's another thing.
Right. Yeah. So come to think of it, I agree with a lot of what you said, but maybe to condense that further, when you say analysis, it is a lot of people write what they think about a topic. What do you think? What do you think? And that's a weird thing. I always, when you ask for analysis, it's no longer not necessarily what you think, because what you think might not be as valuable to the audience. Because again, when you mention genres have different audiences. But especially, for instance, if you're asked to be an analyst, maybe say for a broadsheet or a opinion editorial, then it's more, for me, it is enough from the perspective of to write from this perspective of your discipline, to simply discuss what is happening, or like what is going on. Because I think that's what people kind of forget to do. It's a very deceptively difficult thing to do, especially when using the right words for it, especially when, like what you said, certain words have connotations, have meanings, maybe the unintended meanings or emotions associated with them. So with analysis, you use certain terms that are as much as possible, but not necessarily value free, but as much as possible precise and detached from those unnecessary emotions, and that would be enough. It's not it's difficult. Opinion does not necessarily mean like your conviction, or like, which we can talk about it in the next one, but it's like a sober analysis, or like simply using the right words to say what is,
Mm.
used with the context of the past
Mm.
and what it means for the present and maybe the future. So
Mm.
at least that's the best way I can do it. Like, properly identifying what is. I can relate it to
Mm.
like the as example of like a lot of movie reviews. They rank it from like from a 1 star to 5 stars, and like ayoko siya, or ang ganda. Bakit? Ano? But the weird thing is that honestly, if I were to write movie reviews, I prefer to really discuss what was the movie that they watched without spoilers. And I think that's a better review. It is
Mm.
not, is it bad or is it good? You could say that this movie is an examination of, say, for example, the experience of grief or the experience of identity crisis through maybe limited special effects, like Everything
Mm.
Everywhere All at Once, through the perspective of that. So well, in a way, it's an
Mm.
extended synopsis, but at the very
Mm.
least, it's at least it adds to it rather than just passes judgment. That,
Yeah, that's the thing.
yeah.
The passive is it about a contest between writing about what you think about the topic versus
Mhm.
writing what the topic makes you think?
Writing what the topic makes you think. Hmm.
I don't want to consider this contest, but there's a line between that one. So
Sure.
is there a line between, because if you're going to write an opinion piece, you're going to write about what you think about the topic. So it's
Mm.
just you. You can
Mm.
pepper it with references with other people, but it's basically your opinion.
Mm.
And this reflects the selfishness that is to an extent inherent in writing, but
Mm.
amplified by a thoroughly selfish culture.
Mm. Right.
That's the case. You think that your opinion matters as much as any other people's opinions, or you would write about what the topic makes you think, meaning you're a bit more faithful to what the issue evokes, not
Mhm.
only in you, but probably what it evokes in other people. So it's not
Mhm.
only about what you think,
Mhm.
but it's also about what the topic makes you think about.
Mhm.
So this would give more space to non-knee-jerk reactions, because if
Mm.
you let the issue make you think about
Mhm.
it, then you would never settle with your knee-jerk reaction. So
Yeah.
there's a line between that, I think. Are they mutually exclusive? Probably yes.
Mhm.
You can fit it in one paper, really, but you need to
Right.
set the limits.
Mhm.
So,
And
yeah,
these
well,
are thought processes that, it's difficult to say, like, can it be replicated by ChatGPT? So I think this is a good counterpoint to that, saying these are considerations that can be done by
mm,
an author that is given an audience. At least with the thinking, the audience is you yourself. Like maybe a conversation with your daemon. It's all
mm,
more philosophical, emotional,
mm,
psychological. But as an analyst, maybe once you have an audience, then
mm.
you have a responsibility to that audience. Like, you are in the conversation with it. Um,
And that's
but
the thing.
yeah.
Yeah,
Go
writing
ahead.
is okay. Just to add a bit, it's just popped in
Mm,
my head.
mm,
Probably the people who use ChatGPT and pass it off as their own work writes for the sake of producing something.
right.
Because if you write for the sake not only of producing something, but also for the sake of the writing process itself,
Hmm.
then ChatGPT will never give you that, or any AI
Right.
program will never give you that.
Right.
Because the writing process, I'll dare say this one, but the writing process is far more valuable than what you have produced.
Hmm.
Because
Ah.
what you have produced, it would be piled up underneath
Mm,
future papers. But
sure.
the what
Sure.
the pro the, but the products of the writing process, the
Yes.
habits that you gain,
Hmm.
the questions that you ask, the map that you lay down on the reality that you're looking at,
Yeah.
this is something you would carry until you die,
Hmm.
until you
Hmm.
stop writing.
It's literally the
So
journey
yeah,
rather than
so
the destination. Yeah.
so if you just want to submit papers for the
Mm.
sake of getting a grade, then go ahead.
I
But
mean, which
if
is why, yeah, to in a way help motivate. Maybe that's why in a way it's important to like be a person that your student wants to write to, because in some
mm,
cases parang ano minsan, sir, did you read my paper yet? I'm really happy. Like,
Mm.
these are rare instances, but they're like,
Mm.
parang they're really proud of what they're saying, and as if they're talking to you, to the point where minsan it gets disrespectful. And minsan may mga emoji pa. So, may emoji. This is your homework assignment. But, like, the best papers are the ones that, well, in some cases, sometimes they try to impress you, but at the same time, it's a good attempt, but yeah, it's, you feel that they're conversing with you, and it's not just written for the sake of accomplishing a written assignment. So if they feel
Yeah.
that they can, I mean, for homework, they know that it's only going to be read by you unless
Mm.
you let your colleagues
Mm.
read it, some
Mm.
or other people, if it gets published eventually, but eventually, I think that's what's important. Maybe it's a side comment. Like, if a good, maybe having a good homework depends on whether students trust you to read them, and if you're a person that they want to write to, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
my counterpoint to that one is, well, I don't agree with that one. I don't want to encourage that practice in my own classes. I don't know if
Hmm.
someone actually wrote something to impress me. Probably they didn't. I
But
don't know.
no,
I don't know.
yeah.
But as far as I'm concerned, what I do encourage my students to do is to write in such a way that they are faithful to the topic, to the
Mm,
complexities, to the
right.
multidimensionality, to the ever-changing reality of the topic that they are handling,
Mhm.
rather
Right.
than And I think you can see that. You can see that if they do attempt that, you would see that in their papers.
Hmm.
But if they don't attempt that one, they would probably end with a
Hmm.
conclusion where it's not supposed to be there.
Uh-huh. Okay. Yeah, I suppose.
Uh,
Well, okay. But the point is, when
you
writing,
yeah.
yeah, no, when right, and it's not, I don't want to focus it on, like, me per se. Perhaps I should backtrack on that, but at the same time, you should write, and it's important to know to write for an audience,
Mm.
and I think to know that if this will be valuable someday, even if it were a homework, because some
Mm.
homeworks eventually become, who knows, publications, a journal. I think, and in a way, admittedly, sometimes, just to accomplish a homework, I pretend that this might be published in Daily Inquirer, bago pa pag-Rappler, maybe Rappler, as I don't know,
Mm.
because it to help motivate. Because writing is a form of communication,
Mm.
and when you can, if you're able to write for an audience that you're responsible for, that trust you, and you, in a way, you trust that audience, that mutual relationship, that might be helpful. So that's another approach, a
Yeah,
psychological approach, maybe you can have for
that's one.
writing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's one.
um
The other approach is you write because of the simple fact that you are the first reader of what you have written.
mhm.
So you write for yourself first and foremost. And
Yeah.
this is to an extent a bit more dangerous than writing for an audience,
Hmm.
because
Right.
for writing for an audience, you actually try to grapple with the audience, and the audience, you try to, you make them, respond to it. But if you're writing for yourself, you must have this level of self-criticism that
Hmm.
would keep you from falling in love with your own voice.
Hmm.
So, and that
Yeah.
is far more dangerous, because human beings, we can easily fall in love with our own voice, with our own
Mm.
ideas, thinking that they are our own ideas when in fact they're not.
Mm.
So, but yeah, I'm just resting on the fact that you are the first reader of what you've written.
Right.
And the challenge is up to you. Are you
All
satisfied with
right.
it? Will you ever be satisfied with it?
Right.
Um,
Hence, that's where the expression "kill your darlings,"
yeah.
edit
Or,
mercilessly. Yeah.
yeah. Or you can do for both. You write for yourself and you write for an audience. I think that's the
Mhm.
safest advice that you
Just
can
make sure they're
give.
from different notebooks.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't mix them up. Send it to the editor. What is this? Mamatay ka. Parang, wow, yun pala yun. I suppose let's move on to maybe another form of writing, maybe the last one,
Mm.
for at least for this session. And that is like writing as an advocacy, which is in a way
Mm.
an extension of like me writing for an audience, but maybe a bit more personal. I think
Mm.
that's writing like a, maybe like what you said, it's also a form of polemic, which is meant
Mm.
to provoke and piss off people.
Mm.
And in many ways, unlike an analysis, an advocacy in a way requires
Mm.
an emotional reaction,
Mm.
and in a way emotion begets emotion, so you have to help reveal and use your own personal experiences, like you use it
Mm.
as as a vehicle for example, your message, a vehicle for your goal or your the word again, the word advocacy, your political goal,
Advocate.
for the sake, or what do you say this, for how do you say, on behalf maybe of someone you are advocating for, like maybe a marginalized sector or fellow citizens such as yourself. So any notes on how to write as an advocacy?
I'm of course it's been a while since I wrote my last polemic. It's been a while. I think I should write more. I will write more.
Right.
Just give me more time. Yeah, I should write more.
Okay.
I should write more. I have so much in. I think Lumal. I think it only emerges in part with my Facebook posts. But
Yeah.
right, in writing polemics, well, I would add to what you said. Yes, it's about writing about your personal experience, so on and so forth. It's about advocating for a sector in society. But I think the key to writing an effective polemic is to write about the experiences of your audience. To try to make sense of what they're feeling in such a way that you are pushing for a solution that you are advocating for. Because that's the thing about there's the ineffective polemic, I think, is either focusing on a sector that people don't care about, a problem that people don't care about, or just focusing on your own personal experiences that in general people actually don't care about. So, but if you focus on something, a problem, an issue that they care about, runs deep into their ideals, then that I think is the more effective polemic.
I suppose I'm reminded of like the Legarda letter, when the son just expressed like a very violent and very emphatic
polemic.
Polemic, like disavowal of his mother, like disowning his mother, but at the same time alienating himself from the Filipino people who love mothers generally.
So it backfired.
Yeah.
So again, not all polemics are effective, and it backfired. So it did not have, but then again, are the ordinary Filipino his audience? Are the ordinary Filipino reader his audience?
Yeah.
Because if he wanted the ordinary Filipino to be his audience, then he would never write such a virulent attack on mothers, on his mother.
Yes.
Pero yun eh.
So yeah. In a way, it's your way of empathizing with your audience. It's so as opposed to like just writing what is, maybe this is where you can do the whys and so whats and help clarify like the values of your society or in reference to society. So when you advocate for something, you have to remind your audience, like, because this is good and necessary according to what we believe in as a society. The right to life, the right to the freedom, the nation, or what have you. So but at the same time, you have to ask, like, what's in it for them. So if you need to change this, because if you don't, this will happen to you. I'm trying to remember what's a good polemic, but
have you written a polemic?
Honestly, not in that nothing that follows these tips, which is ironic, but I'm trying to think of a good example of a like a evocative paper at the very least. Perhaps the story of like the Nazi. I can't remember the title, but a lot of tip in my tongue moments. That moment, like at first they went for the communists and then the socialists and then the liberals, and then they went for me because there's no one else to go for. Like, that's a good story that convinces people, like, this is what happens when you sit still. So that's in a way, that essay or that story is, at least, is effective because it's simple, but it is factual and emotionally evocative. I suppose it caters back to Aristotle, with both pathos and ethos. So not only those are their basic three basic elements of rhetoric. So logos, so things should make sense, factual, and true. Pathos meaning emotional appeal, but also ethos. Ethos meaning you have to make sure that you are credible as a speaker to speak about these things. So in a way, to combine both pathos and ethos, you have to have an emotional connection. saying that I know of this because I have myself have experienced this kind of thing.
And
Well,
as far as my own
yeah.
practice is concerned, if you want to address the ordinary Filipino, there should not
Mm.
be to an extent an I.
Well,
Because
not overly
no,
self-referential. Yeah,
no,
but the
it's not,
I should
it's
be
not there.
relatable, saying
No, no,
in a
no, 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 no.
way
Wait.
most.
Let me finish. Let me finish. Let me finish.
Well, there's the I
Let,
can be related to the audience, and that
let,
is why it can be
let,
effective.
let
Yeah.
me finish. Let me finish.
Okay.
It's not a matter of not having an I. Again,
Mm.
it's in the way that you say the we.
Mm.
They would
Yeah.
consider you a credible I if the we that you have portrayed actually appeals to them.
Yeah.
So you don't even need to
Precisely.
actually write the I. So just
That
to
is
be
what I
clear
was
about
saying.
that one.
Yeah.
And that was I was
Yeah.
about to say until you cut me off.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's
Mm.
not a matter. If you want to write an effective polemic, especially for Filipino readers, yeah, don't write an I. It would just make you sound selfish.
Right.
But your we must be to an extent that they can link. It must be so
Mm.
authentic, and it must be so relatable
Right.
that your credibility would be based on that.
Sure.
Because even if you say that you are an I, that you have this experience, you have this experience, you have this experience, but if
Right.
they don't relate with it, they
Right.
will not listen.
So, for example, the image of like evoking the image of riding the LRT. Everyone rides the LRT, or
Mm.
maybe at the very least, if you remember that when you did the piece on the mahirap maging Pilipino, when
Mm.
leaving, I suppose it answers to some people that the frustrations of Philippines and the urge to leave,
And it
which is
doesn't really
why
appeal
it
to many Filipinos.
not to well to a
A few-
certain section, yeah,
a
but
certain section, yeah.
I suppose that's why it caught people's attention because, quite frankly, it actually caught the attention of me, who sometimes think of leaving here, but
Mm.
predominantly, of course, we know that we're staying here. Nandito ang laban, so
But
nandito ang bayan. So yeah,
the best image I can think of an effective polemic is this:
Huh.
there's a crowd, someone shouts, it's probably you, but no one would know. But the crowd would agree with you. That's the best polemic that can be.
Okay,
So the
right.
I is there, the I is in the shout, but the I is easily integrated into the we. The crowd will probably not know who you are unless they lift you up as if you're the leader. But that's the first start of it. That's the best polemic of it.
It could be said by
It's-
anyone, like I am Spartacus.
Yeah. That's basically. But that's the reverse. The I am Spartacus is the reverse of that image.
Yeah.
That what you've said is something that other people would say and would happily say. It's not you putting words in their mouths. It's you being their mouth.
Yeah.
So that's the trick.
Oh, enough with the mouth image. Oh God. So I think that's a good way to cap off that one because that's a good image. But there you have these possible, of course, paths of writing. Writing for audiences, writing for political purposes, as an analyst, as an advocate, or even just thinking. But perhaps we can wrap up with some tips and recommendations as to like writing habits, how to become an effective writer. And a lot of times it's practice makes perfect. So as someone who is prolific and has had many numerous publications lately, what tips can you give for our readers or listeners, readers and listeners? What? Okay.
Well,
Our audience, yeah.
first, never think you're prolific enough.
Okay, wow. Okay.
Never think that you've written enough. The only time you would stop writing if you're an actual writer is when you die. So first habit is just keep on writing. Second, and I think we would agree with this one, keep your notes. So have a systematic set of notes. Notes is an extension of your memory, so that would leave much space for you to think rather than memorize. So have a systematic set of notes. Well, keep a notebook with you. We're going into the more ordinary advice on how to write. You can find writing habits. Okay, I'm trying to find something very unique as a habit of writing. Draw charts, draw graphs, especially if you're writing on theory. Pencil pushing is about drawing graphs. Sometimes writing is not only about writing entire sentences or paragraphs. It's basically just writing graphs.
Right.
So be happy with that one. Second, okay, let me ponder on it. If you have any, you can throw it now. I'll think about my other habits.
Well, for one thing, I think schedule your writing habits, like at the right
Mm.
day. If you prefer writing at day or night, make sure it's those habits. And at the same time,
Mm.
I think I got this from Jordan Peterson, but even like Flannery O'Connor, she is both, they're both prolific writers. They only write 2 to 3 hours, a day, and the rest is dedicated to either thinking or walking, because apparently, our human brains can only write for 2 to 3 hours at most. So if you can dedicate it to that small amount of time, but if you can't do it for 2 to 3 hours, a lot of people would say the ordinary advice: start with 15 minutes. And so just like doing nothing but writing, even like word vomiting. Actually, that's one for some people. It's like word vomit for like 15 minutes. Then of course let it sit, rest for a moment. Like you don't submit it the first draft,
Yeah.
so just
Mm.
let it sit, let it rest, and then look back on it with fresh eyes, and edit mercilessly until, well, you forget it's yours for a moment. So yeah.
Mm.
um and then what's the other one? Oh, I'm afraid to say this, but certain beverages are for certain processes. So because you need, so beer and wine are good for writing. Again, not too much, but if you need to stimulate yourself. But coffee is a bit more for editing. That's what it said. So yeah, I think, yeah, don't, not too
Mm.
much. Okay. Substance abuse. Okay. What else?
Smoke,
Oh,
damn it.
oh my God, a lot of writers are like that. Like the beat writers. Like, what do you call that? Jack Kerouac and all those.
No, I actually use my smoking
And
time to
Hannah
think.
Arendt is okay.
And that's if you're a smoker, if you're listening, yeah, I use my smoking time to think. I never write while smoking, nor do I.
Only moderately.
Yeah, it's strategic, so it's for my thinking. Yeah, I remembered one more. For students who are writing research, or for researchers or young researchers like ourselves,
Mhm.
there are now existing programs for referencing.
Mhm.
Mendeley would be one example for
Yes.
referencing, or you can use Google citations. But
Mhm.
this is an old practice of mine that actually helped me write, and that is I write my references manually.
Mm.
And it sounds cumbersome, and it is cumbersome.
Mhm.
But if you write your references manually, it would also give you the time to locate where to place your references on your
Mhm.
draft. So it's also my way of organizing my thoughts and organizing the readings.
Uh-huh.
So do it manually, as manual as you can. So, and start with Chicago. Don't start with APA. Start with Chicago citation. So yeah, that's another thing for
Why?
me. Because the Chicago is the most difficult. It's the most difficult citation style. So if you start with that, you can easily reduce it to APA, to MLA, or to the other
Mm.
types if the journal would require such changes. So start with
Mm.
Chicago.
Uh,
Yeah. Another thing is, do I agree with schedule your writing? Yeah, if it works for you, it works for you. Again, it's a
uh-huh.
mastery of your own thought processes.
Mhm.
So if you are capable of compartmentalizing your time in such a way, then go ahead. But if you are more like me, and your mind's the compartments of your daily life is actually bigger,
Mm.
I write in long bursts.
Mm.
I write in long bursts, especially for the draft, but I also allot time for writing in short bursts for my aphoristic writing, that is for my notes.
Mm.
So yeah, again, time 2 3 hours of writing. It depends on my mood, really. I
Mm.
can write for 5 hours straight, but
Mhm.
sometimes I would only write an hour. Spend the rest reading. So again, it depends. Again,
Mhm.
it's a mastery of your own. I think that's my last advice that I would give. You need to know how your minds work.
Mhm.
What's your optimal schedule?
Mm.
So
Ah.
then align your writing with that,
Oh.
and yeah,
Mhm.
and have an end goal. Jesus, always give yourself
Yeah.
a hard date, a hard due date.
Mhm. Yeah, that's true. Or even like partition, maybe have a target word count per day. Like if it started with 500 to
Mm.
1,000 a day, yeah, that'll be okay. Just to get used to that
Yeah.
rhythm. Uh, I do have two more that are crucial. Number one, I think I've told you this before. It's important to read what you wrote out loud, because sometimes,
No, no,
when you typed it,
just
when
kidding,
you
just
type
kidding.
it, it can after you've typed it, it sounds brilliant, when you read it. But then all of a sudden, it's like, oh, parang baluktot o masyado mahaba. Like sometimes sentences might be too long. So yeah, so it helps to read it out loud. If it sounds like a logical enough, maybe elegant speech, then that's fine. If it can be read out loud and unawkwardly, sure. But if it sounds off when you read it out loud, then you probably have to change it. And another thing, I think it's probably the most important as a writer, is that I think you have to remind yourself what good writing sounds like, and you have to choose who your favorite writers are. Who do you enjoy reading? And of
Hegel.
course, well, maybe not to people like Hegel, but uh, again, it helps. Maybe okay, and then maybe no, try to most people try to copy their idols, but eventually just try to identify maybe certain patterns. What makes you enjoy their writing. And personally, for me, I like people like particularly Hannah Arendt, remember, because she is able to distinguish and make distinguish from different meanings of different words, especially with German and Greek. So sometimes I do this, like this means this at certain times and that. So it's able to clarify meanings and concepts of words. Or sometimes I like Ernest Hemingway with his shorter sentences, with a beat, and the simple subject and verb agreements, or subject and verbs sentences. There's not a lot of adjectives. It's mostly verbs and nouns. So that's a bit more of specific imagery, not adjectives or adverbs. But yeah, so this is how I like. But seriously, Bart, who do you write like? Or do you have like a writing idol or writing model?
I think that is the next part of. I think just to add on to your advice, I did have writing idols, but I think the next advice, and it's not really advice, but more of a challenge to writing about politics, especially about politics,
Mm.
is to find your own voice,
Mm.
to find a style that is unique,
Mm.
that you can call unique. That's not unique in the sense that it's in a vacuum, but it's something you built on.
Mhm.
It's something you built on learning on how other authors have written.
Right.
So you may have your idols, you may have your models for writing, but I think that's the challenge for writers because you can
Mm.
easily sound like someone. You can easily throw jargons around here. You can easily write long sentences like I have done. But
Mhm.
yeah, it's harder to find your voice. I
Sure.
think I am close to my actual writing style right now. So one thing that helped me is something that I would reiterate with what you said, just to elaborate on it, which is your writing. You need to read your own writing out loud, simply because writing should be lyrical,
Mm.
and lyricism is about an awareness, not only about the words you use, but
Mhm.
about the size of the sentences, the syllables
Mhm.
within it.
Yes.
So I think there's an actual feature on Word,
Right.
a macro system that you can input that can actually highlight the lengths of your sentences,
Mm.
just to make you more aware about whether you're writing a very long sentence. So yes, yes,
Mhm.
yes, Matt, I can hear your mind. So yes, I do. I used to write long sentences. Now I'm more conscious about long sentences.
Right.
So yes.
But it's funny. Speaking of going back to Hemingway, like Joan Didion, who is a very prolific writer, like she recently passed away, and rest in peace. But
No,
what
what the
she,
hell?
yeah,
Oh.
but what she used to do was to type, and as in literally retype the stories of Hemingway just to understand a proper rhythm for her own
Mm,
writing.
mm.
So that's literally like, again, finding her mentors, and
Yeah.
literally before you find your sometimes you find it before you can find your own voice. You have your own mentors to
Mm,
perhaps emulate
mm.
until you find your own voice. That's what a lot of people do.
Or
Of course, it takes a while to shake them off, but I think it's a
yeah,
necessary thing
yeah, it
to
is. It
do.
is.
So
Yeah.
before, yeah,
And by the way, go
it
back to pen and paper. Yeah, for our
pen and
listeners, go back to pen and paper.
why?
or typewriter if you want. Typewriter is nice. It's for the rhythm. It's really nice. But for the pen and paper, why we need to go back to the pen and paper? First, it's far more intimate. It's far more intimate. Second, you're not distracted by your monitor on a computer. If you want to actually focus on writing, you need to separate yourselves from the internet, from your cell phones. And writing on a computer, that's the last thing I actually do. You know, as a writer, that's the last thing I actually do. I only write on a document file when I already laid down my main arguments and my main topic paragraphs. So I usually write my topic paragraphs either on paper or on a typewriter. And this is a quirk that I still have. I always write my analysis and my conclusions on paper with the pen. So I don't leave it to, I don't expose myself to my laptop.
Or distractions,
basically my laptop right now is just a aggrandized MP3 player.
So do you still like write with the music on? Because most people do their homework with like lo-fi or whatever or orchestra music.
Oh yeah, do I? It actually no. I write the most boring parts of my paper with songs, but I write the more intimate parts of my paper with instrumental music. I need it because of my neighbor. My neighbor is a bit noisy, so I need that. But if I'm in a quiet place and if my neighborhood is quiet, I would not listen to music. So, ikaw ba? Do you have any recommended type of genre for writing or for parts of the writing process?
I don't know. Like, it's weird. Like, it used to be, I used to love like the usual orchestra, like, Tchaikovsky or Mozart. Actually, not so much anymore because they tend to make me very emotional, but I tend to, for writing, honestly, two types of music I recommend. Number one, Bach. Bach tends to be very mechanical and very in his rhythms, and it's not very emotional, but it's more experimenting with like the flows of certain notes and scales. But so it's less distracting. And then the other one is Recondite. I think he did the songs for the Young Pope, which is kind of odd. Like, you remember? It's like electro dance music. Techno. Yeah.
Daft Punk is also great for writing.
Not Daft Punk. Although Daft Punk sometimes it gets wordy and then they sing it. I tend to sing too. So honestly, personally, I don't recommend it.
Avoid the songs. If you're writing an analysis or whatnot.
Yeah. Unless, of course, you're doing your bibliography then.
The most boring part. You can use that one. Pwedeng music na pwedeng tugs music. I always listen to military music when I'm on a due date.
Okay.
But that's my personality. Marches. So it depends on your personality what you want to listen. But I think the general rule is, if you want to write intensely, do not listen to songs because that may mix up with your brain. So
sometimes you might type the song lyrics by mistake.
Paru-paru-G. Sumingit ang puting.
According to Machiavelli, paru-paru G. Anyway, 2023. Anyway, it's a remix. Anyway, so that was an interesting discussion with writing. Clearly, we have different styles, but some of them overlap. But do what works for you, really, and maybe you can send your own tips, maybe for us and then your fellow listeners. So hopefully, this was useful for you. But let's go on to, we're already in the process of recommendations. Let's do some more recommendations on, again, books or films or other materials that could be helpful for and enriching our discussion today. So, Forge, any recommendations for us?
I think I recommended. I think I recommended this before, but again, I would like to reemphasize that if you want to have a grasp of the art of writing, you need to have a grasp of your thought processes. So in line with that, I'm recommending John Dewey's How We Think. I think I recommended this before. If I haven't recommended this, then I'm recommending it now. So I'll probably send a link to this one. I think it's available online. So it's basically it's a breakdown of our thought process, the importance of habits of thought, and how to deal with it. So say that's one thing. And another recommendation that I have would be Essays in Skepticism by Bertrand Russell. So I'm recommending Essays in Skepticism by Bertrand Russell, not only because of its content, but also it is well written. So this is a good model for essay writing. Really. It's a really good model for essay writing, and the topics themselves are really good. So, but you can look into one of his essays on intellectual rubbish. Just again to emphasize rubbish, just to emphasize emphasize a warning that people can get stuck with common sense, even if common sense is wrong, and people can get stuck with the average, which ChatGPT offers, even if you're thoroughly wrong as well. So doesn't mean if it's average, it's right. So it's just average, it's common, but not necessarily mean it's right. So yeah. So yeah. So how we think from John Dewey and Essays in Skepticism, if you want a model for good essay writing. So by Bertrand Russell.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks for that. Okay. For my recommendations, quite a bit, but the first one is Elements of Eloquence by Mark Forsyth. And he's a bit of a weirdo, actually. He likes to compile certain elements of language. This one, he talks about the different figures of speech and the interesting applications like alliteration and synecdoche and metaphor and simile and all that. But he also demonstrates them in very, very interesting ways. And there are a lot more than you think. Like, of course, any English class would have a set, maybe 20 at most, but he has like up to like 100 of like forms of like imagery and even with the rhythms of an essay. He talks about it, even like having the same, like one of my favorite well-written like movie lines has a bit of alliteration or having the same sound like for example in Severus Snape is the first scene he was introduced. I can teach you how to bottle fame, brew glory, and even put a stopper to death. So it starts with a B sound, like bottle, fame, brew, and it's even thematically similar. Like they're all potions related. So it makes potions sound cool, even though it's like the boring subject: bottle, fame, brew glory, and put a stopper to death. So yeah, it's funny. Like it's even like you expect him to say something for the third time, but he subverts it by saying something different. So I don't know. Just analyzing it is like anyway. He does that. Mark Forsyth does it similar. So yeah. So if you talk about the rhythm about figures of speech, check that book out. And then there is another thing to read is the essay of George Orwell, Politics and the English Language, which is not so much about how to write, but more like the importance of clear writing and how obscured writing is actually dishonest and bad for politics. So it's again a very wala sinasabi board bato sa langit.
Ouch.
But yeah, and so that's the proper way to maybe align yourself as a writer. It's for clarity and not just to obfuscate or to elucidate or these weird words. Use gobbledygook. And then one of my favorite movies, I'm not sure if I said this before, but I think thinking about this topic made me want to revisit and recommend this. It's called History Boys, written by Alan Bennett. It's about a group of students from an all-boys school who are gifted, and so they put him with special sessions with their favorite teacher, Hector, played by Richard Griffiths, originated by Richard Griffiths, who plays Uncle Dursley from Harry Potter, and a special younger tutor who has a different teaching policy. So their favorite teacher, Hector, believes that education, is done for its own sake. Like he even quotes A.E. Housman, I think, who says that any information is always valuable, no matter how useless it is. So it's for its own sake. So he teaches like with a bunch of songs, poetry, and stage plays, and they would just be playing around. But the other new, younger history teacher was brought in to show them techniques on how to get into Oxford. or to Cambridge or the top schools, because it would the principal wants to increase the prestige of their high school. So in order to do that, he recruited this teacher to again use essay techniques or rhetorical techniques to get people to impress people. But again, so in a way it's kind of like ChatGPT. It's like it's to answer these questions in the most efficient way, but the other part of it is like having the joy of learning itself. So it's an interesting clash of ideologies in between these two teachers. And it's very interesting. It's very touching. And it was adopted. It's a stage play, and it can be found in YouTube, but it's also adapted into a movie. And it's actually, the movie stars a lot of famous British actors. Besides Richard Griffiths, there's what do you call this? Samuel Bennett, who plays Dirk Gently. There's also James Corden, of all people. Like he was one of the boys there. Dominic Cooper and Russell Tovey, so these are well-known actors. So it helped in a way inspire me to be a teacher. When this is one of the movies that did that. So History Boys by Alan Bennett. Yeah, that is it for our episode on AI and writing. Any last remarks, Borge? Yeah.
I think I don't have anything more to say.
Mhm.
Albeit, I think the interesting thing we can pick up for a future episode will be that conflict between education as knowledge for its own sake or education for sake of something else.
Mhm.
There's already a third ground between those, so I think we can
Mhm.
elaborate on that one
Mhm.
soon, because I think that's at the core of why ChatGPT is being used.
Mhm. So
if,
is it to get a grade, or do you want to learn something?
Yep.
So yeah,
So basically that. So yeah, we'll discuss more about that in the future. But for now, no other final words.
All right. So again, we'll return to this, but this was an initial foray into a very interesting time, and hopefully we do not get taken over by robots or replaced by artificial intelligence. But hopefully we can still, like, these are merely tools, and we are still the master of these tools. So we created them, and they are our creations. So yeah, but perhaps it'll be helpful to find a technology expert or software expert to talk about, so we can understand it more deeply and how it works. But yeah, anyway, so remember that the PI podcast can be found on Spotify, Anchor, and YouTube. You may follow us on Facebook as well. And if you have any questions, suggestions, or comments to us, or especially about this topic, or maybe even future episode topics, you may send us an email at pipodcastph@gmail.com. But until the next episode,
magandang gabi, mga ka-PI.